Hello? All right, great. Great. I think I'll start from over here.
So,
Yeah.
sit here?
Great. Great. Hi. I'm going to set up on this side if that's okay.
Okay, that's
with
perfect.
you. Yeah.
Alright, I have the. So we're gonna set Erik Lee here. And then supposed to my Jesse and my
Ahí está.
Figured you might like a chair.
Oh, a chair would be great. Yeah, yeah. Angela, I'm not sure if I asked you before, but have you seen Jennifer Smith yet? She's arrived. Okay. Okay, great. That's good. Thank you so much.
This is the only presentation for this. Okay.
I think so. He's switching. Yeah. Perfect. I'm gonna see if there's one more coaster in the back. Not that it's important, but.
All right. Thank you for coming back on time. Appreciate that. I'm really excited to introduce a partner of mine in a lot of research and work along the border, who will then in turn introduce our panelists and begin this next session. This is where we really get into the nuts and bolts of making the ports of entry, border infrastructure, and all of that come together so that things can move back and forth across the border in an efficient way. So we'll have a great conversation about that. Erik Lee is the director of the North American Research Partnership, and as I mentioned, a close collaborator of mine on this publication and many others that you see out there on the publications table. We're also excited to be working on a brand new project together, helping do some cluster mapping, looking at clusters of businesses that are binational and concentrated along the U.S.-Mexico border. So we'll be visiting many of your communities in the coming weeks to learn more from you and some of your business leaders. But without further ado, let me just pass it over to Erik and say thanks again for being here today and for moderating this session.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Chris. It's a real pleasure to be back here at the Mexico Institute. You do such fantastic work. We've been working together now for several years, worked with Chris and Duncan Wood and Andrew Seeley on a number of great initiatives. Most recently, as Chris mentioned, our recent report, the U.S.-Mexico Border Economy in Transition. And that's a lot of what we're talking about today, these big transitions and sometimes small but critical transitions that are happening at our shared border between Mexico and the United States. Also worked on this with my two very good colleagues, Rick Van Scoik and Ruth Soberanes out there in Southern California and the Phoenix area. We're still in the mode of presenting this report. We first presented it here in a very, very cold February day earlier this year. The Mexican Foreign Ministry has been fantastic, opening up Cancilleria to us in March. The Mexican consulates in Arizona have asked us to present this many times, so it's been a very collaborative effort, a lot of fun to work on. This is a fantastic panel. I've enjoyed the event tremendously so far. A lot of folks said things I really wasn't expecting them to say, and I think it's been great. This panel, Building Tomorrow's Border Today, the state of art in infrastructure, financing, customs, and port of entry management is where we really get down into the wonderful weeds on this policy and this implementation. Sandwiched between two fantastic keynote speeches, one by Senator Cornyn, and the next one will be given by Commissioner Kerlikowske. And I would ask you to stay in your seats after this panel wraps up at 12 o'clock. The commissioner will speak right after us. But we're really asking, where are we now in terms of these issues and what's coming down the pipeline? That's that ability for this panel to look out 3 to 5 years will be really critical for the audience here and the folks who are watching on the internet right now. As we know, the day-to-day realities, as we've spoken about previously, the day-to-day realities of Washington and Mexico City are really, really a long ways from the day-to-day realities of the U.S.-Mexico border. And so what's happening requires a bit of explanation beyond the generalities that a lot of us know so well. And what's so great about this moment in time is that a number of key initiatives that we have heard about for many, many years are finally coming to fruition, or at the very least gaining some really important traction. And I'm speaking principally of things like public-private partnerships that Jesse's going to speak about, and pre-inspection that is so critical to the good functioning of our shared border. And to that end, we have a number of fantastic subject matter experts, both from the private sector and the public sector, with us today. Immediately to my left is Jose Martin Garcia, representative for the Mexican Treasury and Tax Administration Service here at the embassy in Washington. He's presented here at the Mexico Institute before. I really enjoy listening to him speak, and he can I'll read just a little bit of his bio. He was appointed representative of Mexico's Ministry of Finance to the U.S. In February 1996. Prior to his appointment, he occupied the position of deputy representative since starting in July 1992. And he has been, in these capacities, he's been the lead negotiator and the coordinator of working groups created to develop and implement the customs initiatives under the U.S.-Mexico Customs Bilateral Strategic Plan, which was signed between Mexico's Ministry of Finance and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Great to have you here, Jose Martin. Jesse Hereford is chairman of the Board of Trade Alliance, wears a number of hats, and is director of government relations and business development for S&B Infrastructure, a firm ranked 27th in the top 500 design firms by Engineering News Record magazine. Jesse serves as the company's chief liaison to elected and non-elected officials at the local, state, and federal level on issues related to transportation and infrastructure. And it seems as if I'm always following Jesse around in the border region, presenting after him usually. He gives a fantastic presentation always. Really looking forward to what he has to tell us. And finally, on my far left is Jennifer Smythe, Associate Executive Director, pinch hitting today. No thanks to Tropical Depression Bill, which took out one of our panelists or grounded him someplace in the United States. But Jennifer has graciously agreed to pinch hit for Mr. Shuler. She's Associate Executive Director of the U.S. of the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, within Plant Protection and Quarantine at U.S. Department of Agriculture. During her comments, I'll ask her to give a little bit more information about herself, the beginning of her career in the border region, which I'm sure is going to be an interesting story. But for now, without further ado, I think we'll start with Jose Martin, and we'll go to Jesse and finish up with Jennifer. But once again, thanks so much for being here, and let's bring in the cement mixers. Let's put on our USDA issued rubber gloves, and let's get down in the weeds on these issues in the border region.
Thank you very much, Erik. It's a pleasure to be here, and I truly appreciate the invitation. And the work that you and Chris and the Wilson Center have been doing is fantastic. It's an in-depth work that everybody appreciates, and it's great to join this panel, share this panel with Jennifer and Jesse and you, of course. I was listening to Senator Corning, and when he mentioned the plans and the project to have these space launching capacities in South Padre Island, I began thinking about Jules Verne and that book, From the Earth to the Moon, in how Jules Verne tells us about how this rocket was going to be built and sent and launched from Tampa, Florida, to the moon. And all the materials for the rocket were being brought from all over the world on a vessel named Tampico. I'm from Tampico, that's why I'm from. Right. So, in this vessel, the Tampico was bringing all these materials from all over the world, from in hospitable places all over the world, from America and from Africa, everywhere. But at the end, the mission was accomplished. No, and at the end, all the materials from all over the world were brought to this place, from the Gulf of Mexico and all over the world, to Tampa. The rocket was built, sent to the moon, and happy ending, no, at the end. So I don't know if Jules Verne could have thought about how complex the border would turn many years after that, 100 years later or 150 years later, and how complicated it would be today for us to make that that rocket work, bringing goods from Mexico and the U.S. into, let's say, South Padre Island and launch a new rocket. So at the end, my conclusion after this thought is that yes, I don't know if with time we have complicated things, or we are really trying to solve some problems that we created ourselves, or if we just are running with history, along with history, and trying to fix the problems. Whatever the reason, we have a challenge, a very interesting challenge, and if our goal is to increase North America's competitiveness, we must make that border work efficiently, with a seamless process, low-cost process, to launch many rockets or to produce many vehicles or to do whatever we want to do together. Our economies are fully integrated, And if we don't work on this issue or in these issues, we will never be as competitive as we want, and other regions of the world will go ahead of us. So we'll be in disadvantage. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that we've been doing lately. Some of these initiatives I mentioned a year ago in the previous conference, and but I guess an update is due, and you'll see how we're making progress on this. So let me start with something that has been mentioned many times today, and this is the cargo pre-inspection pilots that we are about to launch. Well, first, these cargo pre-inspection pilots mean that we are going to post Mexican customs officers on the U.S. side at certain locations to process cargo jointly with CBP officers. So when the shipment arrives to Mexico, in 99.9% of the cases, we're not going to open that shipment again. That brings a lot of, and vice versa, CBP officers working with Mexican customs officers on the Mexican side of the border at certain locations, that we can do these joint inspections, and when the shipment arrives to the U.S., is not inspected again, or just on exceptional cases. This brings a lot of cost reduction, wait time reduction, significant wait time reduction and cost reduction, as the procedures, the processes have been designed in this way that to facilitate the process to, let's say, unload and reload the shipment only once, not twice on both sides of the border. And that brings significant benefits to the stakeholders, to all stakeholders, including government. The legal framework is in place. Actually, we had this authority in Mexican law since 1991. We introduced this amendment to the law to allow our customs officers to do joint customs inspections with customs officers from neighboring countries at border ports of entry. We had that authority since 1991. What we did in 2003, and we, our President in 2013, President Peña Nieto submitted a customs reform, a significant customs reform that Congress approved, and we expanded the authorities of Mexican customs officers so that we can perform these joint customs inspections not only at border ports of entry and not only with neighboring countries. So now we have the authority to develop or implement these projects, let's say, with any customs authority from all over the world at any port of entry, not only the border ports of entry. But we're going to start with 3 pilots, and these 3 pilots are located as I'm showing here on the slide. The first one is in Laredo, Texas, and Henry Cuellar is not here anymore. Henry has been a big supporter of this project. The city of Laredo came with the political will, the money, and the ideas to make this work, and so we decided to work with the city of Laredo in this project. This pilot will start with, we will start processing, actually there are Mexican customs officers already in Laredo, Texas, testing the procedures and the systems. But we will start processing shipments from the aerospace, auto industry, and electronics to 8 Mexican airports. Let's see if I remember all the 8 airports, but that include Guadalajara, Hermosillo, Ramos Arizpe, Silao, San Luis, Querétaro, Toluca, and I forgot the 8th one. Okay, if it comes back, I will tell you. But these 8 Mexican airports, when the shipments arrive, these air cargo shipments, they won't be inspected again, unless if we have a reason to re-inspect, we will do that. We'll reserve that right, but that's not the intention. The second pilot is the one that we will launch at Mesa de Otay. That support we have in the Tijuana metropolitan area. And this one will be dedicated to, as a start, for agriculture products, Mexican agriculture products that will be exported to the U.S. This brings tremendous benefit to the agriculture sector. Agriculture products, by their nature, I mean, they are perishables, and the treatment of these goods is a good treatment of these shipment is essential. So the less we touch those products, the less we handle the shipments, the better for the products. So at these facilities, we will start with with products included in the NARP program. It's the National Agricultural Release Program that Jennifer knows very well. And these products are the less vulnerable products to be contaminated, and so that gives us the opportunity to test these procedures and then to expand to other products in the future. And the third one is at in the Ciudad Juarez area at the San Jerónimo Port of Entry, San Jerónimo, Chihuahua, which is just across the border from Santa Teresa, New Mexico. And this one is at the Foxconn manufacturing plant. Foxconn is the largest producer of computers in the world. At that plant, they are manufacturing about 40 to 50,000 computers per day. If you order a computer today via the internet, regardless if it's a Dell or an HP or whatever, it is very likely that that order will arrive to Foxconn. It will be assembled there and sent to your home the day after. So the idea of having these three pilots, as you can see, if you see the overall picture, we're dealing with aerospace industry, auto industry, the electronic sector, computers, agriculture, all kinds, different modes of transportation. So that's our plan, to start with these pilots. These pilots will last for 6 months, and we will evaluate, we will assess the success of these pilots, and then decide if we extend them, expand them, and then we will begin thinking in the future about what other locations are good for the program to be expanded to. There are many areas in both countries that want to have something like this, but we should start with a pilot. You didn't launch a rocket with, let's say, with astronauts on board on the first rocket. I mean, you tested rockets, then it was Apollo 11, when you brought these astronauts to put a foot on the moon. So we're doing something like that. So we're starting with these pilots, and we will expand from there. So let me show you some photographs about these locations. Basically, well, the one on the top left and the bottom left, both photos are from Laredo, from the Laredo airport, the new cargo terminal there, where our officers with CBP officers are already testing shipments. The facilities are completed, and we're very close to launch officially the project. The photographs on the right, both top and bottom, are from Otay Mesa, or from Mesa de Otay, Baja California, Mr. Rufo's state. And as you can see, the facilities are also completed already. We have a big space there in tremendous facilities to expand in the future. This big box here is the cool room, so when the fresh produce comes to the port and it's selected for inspection, we can keep them refrigerated, those that need to be refrigerated, and so we will never break this cold chain. So, but this is how close we are. We, as it was mentioned here before, we are negotiating a memorandum of understanding that covers these and many other pilots in the future, and it will be signed soon. The next game changer is the data harmonization, the single manifest initiative. If you think about it, this is an initiative that actually has much more impact than cargo pre-inspection. Cargo pre-inspection benefits those who participate in the program, in each program. Let's say those who are going to ship products from Laredo to these 8 Mexican airports, or the agriculture sector in Baja, etc. But single manifest benefits everybody, all stakeholders. And this means that we are harmonizing all the data elements of the cargo manifest that is filed before CBP and Mexico Customs and before the shipment arrives to the border. We have made a lot of progress on this one, and significant progress, and we will be making very important announcements pretty soon. But let me make some announcements today. For example, for the rail manifest, we have completed and we have in operation a single manifest, rail cargo manifest, at 3 rail crossings for northbound traffic. And the estimated completion date is October of 2015. So by October of this year, all northbound shipments, rail shipments to the United States will have a single manifest. That means the railroad companies are filing exactly the same data to both SAT and CBP. The southbound manifest will start as soon as the U.S. completes the development of its outbound manifest. So in the second half of this year, we will begin working on this one. Let us keep in mind that since Mexico privatized rail 16 years ago, at that time we only processed 1% or less than 1% of our bilateral trade on rail. Today we process 17%. And our projections show that we will reach something around 30%, around 2025, because we're heading towards a North American way of moving cargo. This 30% is basically the same number that you see in the U.S.-Canada trade. So the North America is aligning its way of moving cargo everywhere, and we're heading in that direction. So helping rail, like opening the West Rail cargo, the West Rail bridge in Matamoros Round is important, and we should keep working on these type of initiatives. The maritime manifest, it will enter into force in November. We are actually next week. We have a meeting to complete these. Perhaps we will be able to even start earlier. This includes something that we call the 10+2 data, but that's something that, for example, we can see the tridimensional blueprint of the vessel and to see where every single container is located in the vessel, so that we can expedite the process at the ports, and we can tell the shipping line, put this container here and the other 400 and something, just move them out of the port. But we're very close to finalize this. So also during this second semester of this year, we will complete this one. Air, we have already completed ours. We are testing our new manifest, and CBP is beginning to test its manifest. So also this year we will have a single manifest for air cargo. In truck, that's the challenge. We believe that in early 2016 we will be able to begin testing the northbound piece, and by the end of the year perhaps we will be completing the southbound piece. But at the end, perhaps most likely by the end of 2016, all shipments between our countries or shipments coming from anywhere in the world to our countries or from our countries to anywhere in the world will use exactly the same data elements, harmonized data elements under a single manifest. The next initiative is the next game changer is the mutual recognition agreement that was signed on October of last year. This is an agreement that allows us to recognize CTPAT as a program similar to NEC, and NEC and the U.S. recognizes NEC as a program equivalent to CTPAT. This brings tremendous benefits to the members of these programs, because, I mean, you are not visited twice by the customs authorities from the two countries to validate your or certify you as a member of the program. This is the Secure Supply Chain Program. Also, we provide exactly the same benefits. We require the same standards, and we provide the same benefits. So we do these joint validations and recognize each other, or recognize the other's validation as a validation of ours. The impact is tremendous of this one because let me give you some numbers. Well, you can see them here. 41% of Mexican exports to the U.S. in terms of value, and 24% in terms of volume, belong to Mexican CTPAT exporters. Just to put things in perspective, 41% of our exports to the U.S. are more goods than everything the U.S. imports from Germany, or more goods than everything the U.S. imports from the U.K. and France combined. So the volume is tremendous. And when you talk about 24% in terms of value, you mean that 1 in every 4 trucks is a CTPAT truck. So providing benefits to them, such as the fast dedicated lanes that we have at the border, it's essential. And this brings us to some topics, or some projects that we were discussing or have been mentioned today about these infrastructure projects. For example, the dedicated lanes that we're building at the Zaragoza Bridge in Ciudad Juarez, we're extending these lanes outside the port into the city so that when the trucks arrive to the port, they get the benefit. They can jump on the lane way before they reach the port, so they get the complete. They don't wait in line. They go directly to the U.S. side, and they save a lot of time. So these type of infrastructure projects, new infrastructure projects, we are considering each element necessary so that we can provide the benefit, deliver the benefit for the participants. Another comment on infrastructure. I guess one of the questions that former Ambassador Salucan asked today, and some of the members of the panel commented, but I guess one of the part of the solution on how to address these projects, how to make them work faster, how to deliver on time, is what we're planning to do next. For example, for Otay East, the project in Otay Mesa, but east of the current port, we have decided that we're going to design this port together, that we're going to define joint processes such as joint cargo inspection and such type of operations together. So this for sure will accelerate the process, will allow us to define jointly at the same time what we want to do and when to deliver these projects. We're working with Canada Customs as well on a mutual recognition agreement that will bring the 3 countries in North America completely harmonized in their secure supply chain programs. And very quickly, let me mention about 2 other game changers. One is Mexico's single window system. We already have a single window system. We have it since January 2012. It's mandatory. Today in Mexico, you cannot import or export any good if it's not through the single window system. It's not a perfect single window system, but it's getting there. And it has helped us a lot in interacting with all the agencies involved in processing any shipment. So in the U.S., based on President Obama's executive order, is to complete its single window system in 2016. Canada is getting there. And after the U.S. completes this, we will talk about some synergies. How can we make these systems work better somehow in a synchronized way? That will require a very strong cooperation and work between all the agencies from both governments to harmonize their import and export requirements. The final game changer that I want to share with you today is this one. This is also a unilateral one, not a bilateral one. But this is something that we will begin announcing at the border at every port. We are moving in Mexico to what we call a human-less process at primary. Let's say, when the trucks arrive to the board, to the import booth, you in the next months, actually starting in October, at some locations, you will not see a human inspector there. We will read the chip contained in the truck and in the shipment. We will identify the shipment. The system, the risk management system, as it does today, will determine if that shipment is going to be sent to secondary inspection. And we will do the same at the exit control gate of the ports. These personnel will be relocated to secondary inspection in other locations. But a fully automated process is coming, and let me show you. This is the table that shows the dates when we will be implementing these at the border, and you will see these. I mean, if you can identify your location at the border, you can see in October of this year and until September 2016, you see the ports that this project will be implemented. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jose Martin. We're way out of the 19th century now, obviously, and hurtling forward. That was fantastic. Lots of questions. There will be a quiz at lunchtime, just so you know. But thanks very, very much. It was important to get through all of that. Those very interesting developments. Jesse, you're next up.
Thank you, Eric. I'd also like to thank Chris Wilson, Duncan Wood at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and I'd also be remiss as chairman of the Border Trade Alliance and not thanking our staff. So Noe Garcia, our president and CEO, and Garrick Taylor, thank you for all the hard work that went into this. As we talk about financing projects, we're an infrastructure company. We do the engineering, we do presidential permitting of ports of entry. The financing of the project is always the toughest part. And so as federal government budgets have shrunk and our dedicated funding sources for the border have been eliminated, we had to move towards public-private partnership. And just a little bit of history, in 2005 in Safety Lou, that transportation reauthorization bill created a program called the Coordinated Border Infrastructure Fund, CBI. Several projects were done under CBI. CBI was set up for international freight movement. It didn't add any additional money to the budget, but the portion that each state got for their federal gas tax returns had to spend a portion of it, and then Congress set that portion for border projects. A state like Texas received $200 million. A state like California received $55 million because of the allotment and the way that the formula was written. So in MAP 21, we fast forward to 2013, they eliminate CBI and there's no dollars attached to it. So CBI then gets rolled up under another program of state and national significance. And so now the border finds itself competing with the major metropolitan areas. And we know, the dollars will go to the Houstons, the Phoenixes, and the Los Angeleses of the world, as opposed to the border. So City of McAllen, and I know the mayor is here, received $7 million in CBI funds that originated from the feds, went to TxDOT. The city receives it. They say, we want to expand our port of entry. We want 2 new inspection booths and another lane in secondary. And CBP says, we can't accept your money. And the city says, well, why not? You have no budget for this. We're giving you $7 million that were federal funds. And CBP said there's no legal mechanism for us to accept your dollars. And so that's where the mayor, Enrico Villarreal, and the Border Trade Alliance got very involved in this issue. And so I know, Eric, you talked about the 3 to 5 year prognosis. We were very excited to get Section 560. Section 560, in turn, had modifications of ports of entry in that legislation, and as we interpreted it, obviously we didn't interpret it the way that CBP did, we did expect to be able to handle infrastructure under 560. CBP's attorneys came back, said you can't, modifications are minor things, not full-on ports of entry. So we went back and worked with several congressmen to get Section 559. So now 559 does address the infrastructure piece. With respect to PPP, it was a very bipartisan issue. I mean, nothing in D.C. is bipartisan anymore. However, Senator Cornyn, Congressman Cuellar, Congressman Vela, Congressman O'Rourke, Congressman McCall, and Congressman Carter. So you even had Republicans that weren't from the border say, that's a great idea. If the government is your impediment to expanding your infrastructure or staffing it in the appropriate way, let's move out of the way. Let's get the private sector in and let's let them invest in this so we can move goods and services. So through Section 560, City of El Paso was selected, as Senator Cornyn said, and I know Congressman O'Rourke did a lot of heavy lifting there. And then the South Texas Assets Consortium, Sam Vale, pulled together 5 communities, the City of Laredo, his private international bridge, City of McAllen, City of Pharr, and Cameron County. So 11 ports of entry came in under this one umbrella. Just very, very innovative. And so, Sam, thank you for the leadership on that. So that focus on the staffing, now we're moving towards infrastructure. Section 559 applications were due December 23rd, and so we're expecting announcements here this fall. So we'll see how many projects for infrastructure will be funded or will be accepted by CBP, and then as they move through that process. Again, financing is the biggest issue. CBP has a budget of $12 billion. However, they collect $40 billion total in fines, fees, duties, everything else. That other $28 billion goes to the Treasury and is spent elsewhere. So you heard earlier, Congressman Hurd, we've been working with him and Chairman McCall on trying to keep a portion of those dollars at the border so we can focus on border infrastructure. I'd also be remiss if I didn't recognize Jeronimo Gutierrez and Alex Hinojosa from NADBank. They have the capitalization efforts through the high-level economic dialogue. Both President Obama and President Peña Nieto have highlighted the NADBank as a bilateral bank that already is an institution that can play in this world. We just need to make sure that we give them the capital to be able to help us on the border, expedite goods, people, and services. And so just some other upcoming legislative agenda items that we've been working on. Congressman Cuellar put the freight corridor language starting at the ports of entry in the appropriations bill. We've worked very closely with Chairman Shuster. They don't want to go back to adding more programs because they just consolidated a bunch under MAP 21. However, when you look at the amount of freight that crosses at the U.S.-Mexico border and the U.S.-Canadian border, there needs to be dedicated funds that go there. And so all we did was connect the freight corridor to the port of entry, which we feel is extremely important. And then finally, I was Jose Martin, very excited to hear about, the game changers. Great presentation. And, I'm hoping that at some point in time, as we move our legislative agenda as an organization forward, we can work with CBP to get some of the things you showed us that Mexico is doing. Automated releases, electronic tolling and different types of things that have been discussed at the border. So the prognosis is good for the next 3 to 5 years. I think I can't look in the crystal ball yet. We need to see what CBP comes back with here in the fall under Section 559. And then we are working with Chairman McCall to eliminate the 5-year pilot and make it a contiguous and continuous program, so that if the federal government's budgets don't correct themselves, private sector, communities like McAllen can step up and pay for that. And I'd also like to highlight 2 board members, and I mentioned Sam earlier, but staying in the back is with Ambassador Bridge. Both are privately owned bridges, so they've had public-private partnerships forever, because they own their facilities. So this is nothing new. That we're not doing anything innovative. The model exists. We just need to ensure that the folks in Washington understand the needs at the border, and you heard that through the perception comments during the first panel. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Well, thanks so much, Jesse. A whirlwind mini history of how these funds work and maybe don't work in some cases. Thanks so much. BTA, a really important organization, one of the few border-wide organizations. The U.S.-Mexico border is a really difficult geographical space. It's very, very long, and it tends to break itself up by sister city pairs and small mini regions. But really appreciate your work. Jennifer, on to you.
Thank you, Erik. And it's a pleasure to be here with Jose and Jesse this morning and all of you. It's like I wanted to share a little bit about my background. As Erik mentioned, I do work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, and under that, the Plant Protection and Quarantine Agency. And our mission is to safeguard U.S. agricultural and natural resources against the entry, establishment, and spread of economically and environmentally significant pests, and we facilitate the safe trade of agricultural products. I've worked for the agency for the past 24 years, and interestingly enough, I started my career on the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso, Texas, as a cooperative education student while attending New Mexico State University. And I had an opportunity to have a firsthand glimpse and become familiar with the interaction of all of the partnerships and the infrastructure. And so it was nice to hear from Jose in terms of data harmonization and from Jesse in terms of the infrastructure and how important that is. But one of the things over the course of my career that has been extremely important is our partnerships with our stakeholders, with our collaborators, to ensure that we're sharing information, to ensure that we're communicating and identifying practical and operational feasible ways to facilitate the movement of safe trade. Over the course of my career, I've also worked in Dallas, Texas, Wilmington, Delaware. At our headquarter level, I've covered transit and border policy, again, working with Mexico and Canada, and as well as international trade, at one point covering Mexico, Asia, and South and Central America. And a good deal of my time over the past 8 years has probably been focused in the Caribbean region in terms of working with countries to harmonize our strategies for pest exclusion mitigation and working on the offshore component in terms of how do we work together to harmonize, to address risk offshore before it becomes an issue onshore, recognizing that port of entry is only one way for pests and diseases to become established, but working with our partners abroad to determine how we can all work together, since the movement of pest and disease often spreads very quickly once it starts moving through trade. And after that, I was working with our pre-clearance and offshore programs, which I'll talk a little bit more about some of our initiatives and things that we're currently doing and will be doing going forward. I also am now working in our policy management health programs covering agricultural quarantine inspection. So I apologize at the end if I'm not able to answer all of your questions. I'll be sure to get back to you in any event I can't, but I'll provide some information about what we're doing. So we collaborate with U.S. Customs and Border Protection to ensure that agricultural trade flows smoothly, while also ensuring that the imports meet requirements designed to safeguard U.S. agriculture and plants and animal health. PPQ, which is the Plant Protection and Quarantine, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, each have separate but complementary responsibilities in facilitating the safe entry of cargo. We are committed to providing adequate and timely pest identification and inspection support at every border crossing. And I'll cover a little bit of some of the things that we're doing. And one arena is in terms of pest identification service. This is one of the ways that cargo at times gets held up at the ports of entry when a pest is found on agricultural cargo coming in. It's like over the past year, we had 2 identification facilitation reviews that were jointly conducted by one of our associate deputy administrators for field operations and the executive director from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. One review was in West Texas and the other was in East Texas. During the 2 identification facilitation reviews, the team reviewed current processes, identification services and levels, as well as Customs and Border Protection Agricultural Pest Exclusion Coordinator Specialist position, which I'll talk about in a moment. To support the identification facilitation initiative, within the last year, 3 pest identifiers have been added along the border, and these were placed at Pharr, El Paso, and Laredo. And one thing I did forget to mention was last year I did have the opportunity to visit Pharr, McAllen, and Laredo. And so I had an opportunity after 23 years to see how things are currently moving on the border. And it was a very enlightening experience. It was interesting how some things stayed the same, but there was great advancement in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the flow and movement and the advancement in technology for data harmonization. And it's encouraging to hear the direction that we're going as we work together towards that. In terms of the agricultural pest coordinator specialist with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, they are specialists that actively seek to gain authority to identify non-actionable pests to facilitate trade. They assist the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Plant Protection and Quarantine area identifiers by reducing the number of pest identification requests that are sent to PPQ identifiers. And currently we've learned that the Apex, as they're called, is working well in Pharr, Texas. And we're engaged in regular discussions about placing additional positions in Otay Mesa and Nogales. And something that was mentioned from Jose in terms of the National Agricultural Release Program, that's been a very effective tool for us in terms of having a positive impact on Mexico imports into the U.S. It has a proven track record of over more than a decade, and we're looking to continue to expand and evolve. I'm aware we've also had conversations with Mexico in terms of having the program that they are starting up. And the next generation of this program will be entirely risk-based sampling with additional thresholds for medium and high risk across all commodities. And I think that's one of those things that we continually evaluate is the risk. And every day it's a moving target because pest and diseases spread very quickly and they're moving through different conveyances, whether it's cargo, passengers, or other modes of transport. Another area where we are involved in terms of the management of agricultural trade is with our pre-clearance programs. We currently have programs in Mexico in which we facilitate the clearance of certain products, whether it's through treatments or inspections, as a way of facilitating the movement and clearance across the border by clearing them on the Mexican side. We also have our International Services Division, which has an office posted in various locations throughout the world, one of which is Mexico. And they have ongoing dialogue with both the Ministry of Agriculture as well as with all of our stakeholders and partners and industries on both sides of the border. In terms of our ongoing collaboration with Customs and Border Protection, this is a dialogue that occurs daily. On a daily basis, we engage with them in terms of addressing the prompt release of cargo that may be held at the border, as well as providing legislation and guidance and policies. And we also have other forms in which we have more formal interaction with them through our Joint Agency Task Force and through our Joint Agency Quality Assurance Program, which allows us the opportunity to be out at the ports of entry and have an opportunity to see the challenges as well as the best practices for how can we work together to improve the way we're doing business and providing the support that we do. We also attend other initiatives such as the Texas Roundup as a way of engaging with stakeholders. And then we have our Science and Technology Division, which is exploring new technologies on an ongoing basis, such as molecular tools and ways that we can further get to the identification of pests as a way of being able to release cargo more clearly, as well as looking to alternatives for treatments and other things that often hold up trade. And they have been working on an ongoing basis with the Department of Homeland Security. And lastly, I'll mention that one of the other initiatives is the International Trade Data System, that is a streamlined initiative that U.S. Customs and Border Protection has been working on, and it's a paperless entry system that's automates the commercial environment in terms of being able to clear cargo, all data entries filed electronically versus paper, which at some point all federal agencies will have access to the system and to be able to get different pieces of data. And on that note, I'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jennifer. I know USDA plays such an important role at Nogales, Arizona, and on the Sonoran side. That's in my neck of the woods. The USDA has inspectors in Mexico, which is a concept that a lot of folks here may not be familiar with, but absolutely very, very important. This has been a fantastic panel. I heard many, many important themes brought up. Among them, what Jennifer was just touching on, the importance of the interagency kind of dynamic, both in Washington and at the border between agencies that have complementary inspection duties. Also, lots of interesting stuff on data harmonization. And this is a question I'll kick back to you during the Q&A. Where are we in terms of the sharing of data between the two countries right now? If you had a dashboard, where would we be on that dashboard? Really, really important to share data, to have a border that functions efficiently. Also, automation. I mean, Jose Martin, you may have solved the customer service issue at the borders with this humanless process. You may have solved it right there. Just take that element out of the picture. Really interesting to me. And it would be fascinating to get everyone's take on how that should look here 3 to 5 years out. But one element that I'd like to delve into a little bit is the element of working with community stakeholders. Chris and I talk a lot about this in our report, just the importance of local communities and the different economic development stakeholders. It is amazing when you go to these border communities, just the breadth and depth of folks working in the economic development sphere, how many organizations there are. San Diego has numerous organizations, and that's just one community along the border. What can the communities do to make their case in a more effective manner to the federal agencies as well as their congressional and delegations? Let me just stop there and let's just talk a little bit about the community aspect of what you do. Jose Martin, I'm particularly interested in how Hacienda approaches this issue.
Yes, thank you, Eric. And I'll be glad to also expand on the other topics as well whenever you say. What we have between Mexico and U.S. Customs, it's what we call port security committees. That's on one hand, and these committees meet biweekly. The port directors from both sides of the border and staff meet to address safety and security issues so that they can focus their attention on those issues and try to expedite trade. By just bringing attention to whatever a threat may be or whatever an issue it may be. On the other hand, these same committees have kind of the soft side of the equation here, and they meet also regularly. Every port decides the frequency of their meetings. We follow this philosophy that if you've been to a port of entry, well, you've been to a port of entry. That's it. So each port has to decide, or a pair of ports must decide exactly what they need to expedite trade. That's one thing. The other thing is also at some instances we have what we call regional or sub-regional meetings. And let me give you an example. You cannot address, let's say, the Rio Bravo and the Rio Grande Valley area just by looking at Brownsville, Matamoros. If you're not looking at McAllen, if you're not looking at all the bridges there. So you have to have a regional perspective to see how to plan better for that region for commercial traffic. Same occurs in Tijuana. No, you have to take into account San Isidro, Otay, Tecate, and even Calexico. No? So that's the approach we're following. So these committees meet with the trade community. They, of course, discuss issues on how to move forward some recommendations. Of course, resources are limited, as Jesse was saying, as we all know. So we do whatever we can. On the other hand, the private sector, in my opinion, in our opinion in Mexico, should also play a very important role here, a more aggressive role. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, we tested 24/7 service at 4 locations at the border. It was Nogales, it was Otay, Nogales, Juarez, El Paso, and Laredo, I guess. So following this philosophy of that if you build it, they will come, well, it didn't work. We announced the project, announced the pilots for 6 months in advance. We told the community, well, you have to work with the trade community. You have to work among the exporters, importers, brokers, carriers, to see if instead of congesting the port at 5 p.m. every day, look at different hours. And now we're going to open the port not from 8 to 8, but let's say 24/7. adjust just your logistics, adjust to the new era that we're starting here, and try to move shipments perhaps at 2 a.m. in the morning, because we'll be here and we'll be provide you service. It didn't happen.
Right.
And we found that, and we had to close all the pilots without any success. We found that, of course, some carriers didn't want to transport goods at those hours. Some brokers didn't want to have staff working at that time, or they didn't, and they wanted to continue playing golf in the morning and open their shop at 2 p.m. So to start shipping goods in the afternoon. Honestly. So, some of them, no, but it didn't work. So, one thing that we have decided now is that we should explore that again. And we are going to explore that again soon. At some point, we will pick some ports, we will invite the trade, and we will make an announcement 6 months in advance or 8 months in advance, so that companies can plan their logistics according to the new hours of service. And this may help or alleviate congestions, that we have today. Keep in mind, everybody talks about infrastructure. And everybody talks about millions and millions of dollars coming and going to build new infrastructure. It's good to build new infrastructure, modern infrastructure, jointly designed infrastructure, as I was mentioning. But we also have to utilize the infrastructure we have today. We have underutilized infrastructure today. Seriously, there's no single port that works, for commercial cargo, that works 24/7 at the U.S.-Mexico border today. And there are plenty of them at the Canada-U.S. border. So we have to take into account all these elements and make good decisions about how to better utilize the infrastructure we have, and then we see how can we expand infrastructure at the same time. No? So.
Right. It's fascinating when pilots don't work, when they fall flat on their face, and this is one in which that was the case. Very much the case in Nogales. A lot of the families, a lot of the businesses there are family-run, not really interested in doing business 24/7. Jesse, a lot of the communities along the border are BTA members, and I just wondered if you would talk about their experience a little bit, and then maybe talk about this one of my favorite topics, failed pilots.
Sure. Well, thanks. You mentioned earlier the advocacy efforts and how border communities advocate in Washington or Mexico City, and that's what our organization does. We were founded in 1987. San Diego to Brownsville, very, very strong. Northern border members as well. Detroit, Troy, Michigan. Roger from Delphi is based there. Buffalo, New York. So from an advocacy perspective, I think, I don't want to say we're the only game in town. I know there are others that focus on this, but no one drills down to the actual policies and projects at the border as well as we do. And I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but when you look at the diverse group that we have on our board and that are our members, you have manufacturers, you have logisticians, you have communities, cities, counties, chambers of commerce, EDCs. We have it's like a melting pot within. You should see our board meetings to try to actually get positions out just because of all the different perspectives. Our December board meeting, which is our housekeeping board meeting, takes us 3 to 4 hours just knocking out our policy positions. So from that perspective, we do have a lot of members on the border, and every border is different. Jose mentioned every port is different. It is. Cameron County operates their 4 ports of entry, so that's under one roof. That makes it easy. You move up, you go into Hidalgo County, and they have 7 or 8 ports of entry owned by 6 or 7 different entities, and so it's trying to focus on regional projects. Because regionalism is what sells here in Washington. The dollar is so limited. You mentioned data sharing, and everyone's talked about the West Rail International Port of Entry. It's the first rail bridge in 107 years, and the hang-up now is a gamma ray machine. And so working with Aduanas and the Mexican government, CBP has come to an agreement that the gamma ray machine for now will be on the Mexican side, and they will both share the data, the images on both sides, so they can get the throughput, so they can open the first rail bridge in Now it's 108 years, right, because of the problems we're having. So it's just getting longer and longer for us. The bridge has been constructed. It's just now the processes. You basically have three issues at any port of entry. Either you don't have sufficient personnel, which is causing issues, you don't have sufficient infrastructure, or it's the processes. And so, Jose Martin talked about what the Mexican side is doing on the processes. So did Jennifer. So those are some of the things that are going to help us in that area. Through the public-private partnerships, now we can focus on the staffing and the infrastructure piece. So things are looking good. It's just we need to continue to push here in Washington, and the best way to do that is to join the Border Trade Alliance. Thank you very much. It's my last cheap plug for the day.
Thanks so much. Jennifer, did you want to touch on kind of USDA's work in the border communities a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Eric. Just a few things that we do. We have offices in all 50 states in terms of having a state plant health director. And we also have staff located locally in numerous locations where ports of entry are located. And that's an excellent opportunity. They conduct a lot of local outreach with the importing and exporting community and industries, as well as the border authorities and the port authorities. And that's one of the avenues where there's opportunities for providing feedback. I know we have a lot of local staff that share information in terms of the type of issues that we're facing and changing, as well as getting feedback. Something that we're always open and welcome to is hearing your feedback in terms of how we can improve our services and our support that we provide. We also have opportunities at the Washington level, we have regular and ongoing stakeholder meetings. In terms of annually, there's a number of various stakeholder meetings that we hear, or the way of hearing back. Also through our rulemaking and legislation process, there's an opportunity for public comment. And additionally, we have stakeholder and outreach staff who actively work to engage to ensure that we're reaching all of our affected audiences. And so at any point, we definitely would love to hear from you on ways we can do that better.
All right, fantastic. Just circling back to Jose Martin's comment about these ports being a system of systems. You cannot look at, there's two things going on. Each port of entry is a world unto its own, and it's also part of a broader system. That's really important to keep in mind here in Washington. And I think with that, we will open it up for questions and answers. We have a decent amount of time. You've got some really great subject matter experts up here, so fire away. Gentleman in the back.
Thank you, Sergio Contreras for the City of FAR. We own and operate an international bridge, and also members of BTA. Jesse, thank you for your leadership. Jennifer, thank you for your support at our port of entry. Greatly appreciate it. My question is for Mr. Garcia, relating to your point on the pilot program on the ag inspectors. Could you expand briefly on that, and then also specifically on where are you on your timeline on that specific pilot program?
Yes, of course. This one is at Mesa de Otay in Baja California, and our plan is to start by the end of the summer. The facilities are there. We already have them ready. The program will include, as I mentioned, NARP products. These are the less vulnerable products that are less vulnerable to contamination. So they are much easier, let's say, to process for the agriculture inspectors. CBP officers and the PPQs will be working with the SAT officers, the Mexican Customs officers, and Senacica officers as well, the Zagarpa Senacica officers from Mexico at these facilities. And we expect to start the pilot with around 200 trucks per day. That includes the NARP products, 225 trucks per day. Most of these shipments come from Baja California. Some others come from other regions nearby, but most of them from Baja California. That's what the project includes. If successful, then we will see how to expand this. Can we include other products? Then we will need not only the PPQs, but we will need USDA officers there to see if we can expand to other products outside of the NARP list. And after that, we can also expand to other products outside the agriculture sector. We have the facilities, we have the space, the capacity to process more and more. But as I mentioned, we have to start with a pilot, which lasts 6 months. We will evaluate, and then we will decide how to expand.
Great.
Mario Lopez from San Diego. Jose, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to, this is great, and I think it's a direction a lot of people here hope that we're going towards. I want to point out something that's happening in San Diego, Tijuana. There's a new facility on the Mexican side, El Chaparral, business land porter, 50,000 vehicles coming in. We have a new freeway that's going to be readjusted on the U.S. side. We have the funds. CBP and GSA are expecting to put southbound inspection booths on that project. In the original design, southbound inspection wasn't there. Now it is. When I talked this with your colleagues back in Tijuana and San Diego and Mexico City, Mexican Customs is not aware that CBP is about to do inspections 500 yards from the new state of the port of, Mexican port. And that, from our point of view, is going to, we have 50,000 cars, coming in every day. Right now, we already have peak times going into Tijuana. And that's without anything. Now, so that for me goes contrary to everything that you're portraying here about joint cooperation, data sharing, doing double inspections, and the same people coming northbound and southbound. I don't know if you knew of that, and if you could address it. And just one comment for Jesse. You mentioned 3 points, Jesse, about the management of the port of entry, right? Technology, staffing, infrastructure, and the fourth one, and I think we're lagging on this one, is technology. The best option that we have is Sentry. And we're going to do an event in San Diego in the fall on the 20 years of Sentry, which we piloted in San Diego and Alta Mesa. And what's next? Who's talking about the next era of, technology that's going to be deployed at the border? And I don't know where that discussion's being placed. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, great question.
Well, on the San Isidro project, the I-5 connection with El Chaparral has been delayed several times on the U.S. side of the border. It was originally scheduled to be delivered this year, and now it's been postponed till 2018. And apparently this year they're going to start the construction. I've learned about these outbound inspection booths that they want to deploy there or build there. The information I've been getting is that these booths are not being built for permanent outbound inspection, but just, let's say, temporary inspections at certain hour of the day, certain days, etc. So that's what I know at this point. Yes, I agree with you. The more we cooperate and the stronger the cooperation, the better we can do this, expedite both cargo and passengers. Each country reserves its right to inspect inbound and outbound. It depends, depending on the threats, depending on the situation, etc. So if these booths are going to be actually used for just, let's say, surprise inspections at certain time of the day, certain days of the year, etc., that's fine. No, yes, I wouldn't agree. I don't like the idea of a permanent outbound inspection. I agree with you. On the second question, let me jump in and just perhaps provide part of the answer. I guess part of the solution is, as I mentioned, when we are talking about designing jointly a port of entry, Otay East is being envisioned this way. We are working on this idea with a binational group that will jointly design for joint processes. We're thinking about reversible lanes, bidirectional lanes for passenger and cargo, so to better use our capacities, our infrastructure capacities. So that's the idea. So the way to go in the future is that every single new port at the border should be jointly designed. In SAT, CBP, and the Mexican Immigration Institute should work together in defining these processes of joint inspections, so that we make better use of these resources, but at the same time we expedite the traffic. I'm sorry.
No, it's a great point, Mario, and I do consider technology as a solution to the future, but I consider that under processes in my three. Discussing southbound inspection, we heard Congressman Cuellar highlight the $40 billion that goes into Mexico for we send money and guns, and Mexico, in turn, the cartels send drugs to the north. And so I think that's one of the interdiction efforts that CBP is moving towards. And as a company that designs ports of entry, and we have in some small places like Presidio that Congressman Hurd mentioned, they're asking for areas for southbound inspection as well. So obviously they don't have near the traffic that San Isidro has, or they won't have the backup that you have, but that's the direction that they're moving towards right now.
Fantastic.
Hi, I'm Kathy Neal from Regal Beloit. I just have a question for Jose Martin. Thank you for presenting all of the game changers. It's very exciting. And speaking as a member of the private industry, I would just like to point out that I have many, many employees working in Mexico who produce the products that we export. And so asking them to change their schedules or production schedules to accommodate the hours of the border operations doesn't make as much sense of asking the border operations to change their schedules to accommodate our thousands of employees who produce the products. So just, when we consider the crossing times and the infrastructure that's available, that's something to keep in mind, is that a lot of companies are producing just in time, and they've got products that are coming off of the production line, loaded into trailers. There's no room to stage, there's no room to store, and they're ready to cross. So if the bridges can accommodate, or the crossing points can accommodate that production cycle, I think that would make commerce flow a lot better. And it would I know it would reduce our inventory costs, which, is currently an expense for us. I have another point as well, so go ahead. Well, I just wanted to comment on the automated release. I think that is such, it's a significant game changer, significant change in the way that customs authorities had looked at clearance processes in the past, because it was always thought that the eye-to-eye contact between the inspector and the driver was key to the release. So now that that's being removed or being done indirectly, I think that's huge, and I would really like to see that be successful, and I think that's awesome.
On your first comment, I just let me clarify. This would be an option, of course, for companies that want to adapt their logistics somehow, that they may take advantage of this. But in order for the government agencies to justify this expenditure, with these hours of service, we need to have the volumes there. So the idea is, if we pilot something like this at some locations, we will work with the trade community, and that was in response to your questions of the trade community. We will work with the trade community to identify who are the, let's say, the volunteers to test this and to expand from there. Now that's the idea. On your second comment, let me very quickly show you this. Yes, it's been mentioned here all morning that we should build land ports of entry as airports. Well, perhaps. This idea is that we follow a different approach. We are trying to make this as the new approach in supermarkets, where you don't have a cashier, no? So you go there, you pass your goods, the barcodes, etc., and you pay and you go. So that's the approach we're following with this idea. The system will allow us to identify the truck, the conveyance, the box, the driver, and the shipment. So we will not need our primary booth inspector right there. The system, as we do today, the risk management system and targeting system, will determine if that shipment should be sent to secondary. And secondary, of course, we will have humans. And we will then inspect cargo if that shipment was sent to secondary. And when the shipment is released, either if it was released at the front gate or through secondary inspection, when it will approach the exit control gate, and we will not have a human there as well. We will identify the shipment and determine if it has gone through all the process and let it go. That's the idea. It will save us a lot of money. It will save a lot of time to the stakeholders, both carriers and importers and exporters. And we, at the same time with the fast lanes and other procedures, we will have some of these dedicated lanes as well for fast participants or express lanes participants. But at the end of the day, you see this table, every single port of entry, every single inbound lane in the country will have the system.
Fantastic. Denise Duchesne?
Thank you. And actually, she sort of preempted me because my comment was in part, I remember that pilot, and my recollection was precisely what she said. What I heard from people was, it's a pilot. Nobody believes it's going to be here in 6 months. Why would I change my production schedule to do something for 3 months?
Yeah.
And so I don't know how you solve that one, because the opposite pilot, the pilot on the pre-clearance, I think that works as a pilot, because you're going to establish something, test it, and you can just keep going, right, once that's proven to be right. But this one was tricky, and I do remember, and I don't think it was necessarily a failure in a sense, but it was, because it didn't produce the volume.
Yeah.
But my recollection was that most of the folks said, they're only going to pilot it. They're only going to let us do it for 3 or 4 months. What am I
Perhaps we
gonna
have
do?
to improve our message. I agree with you.
Well, it's hard to do in that way. So how you sort of address the issue of who can change, or maybe it's looking at it gradually. Maybe we go 2 hours, and can we get them to keep going and start moving in a certain direction. And I would only offer to, I'm so glad that you indicated that it really is. I've heard it as more of a could be, but you've said it is, that at Otay East that we're going to try to do that joint facility, which I think is huge. And it may be an opportunity, again, because of the planning for that and the tolls and the way that's being proposed and the possible reversible lanes, all of those issues, could be the place where you can go 24/7 because of the pricing and using the pricing as a way of judging that. We'll make it less expensive if you come at midnight. And that could be an incentive to help people rather than just trying to say, gee, you want to try this now.
Just on the first issue, I was part of those discussions, and I perceived that reaction from them. Well, it's only a pilot. Well, but if it works. But the trade community didn't want, at the same time, that we establish kind of a benchmark or line. Let's say, how do we justify this service? Well, if we have, let's say, 150 trucks from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., for example, or 250 trucks, whatever, that would justify the expenditure of our personnel and systems working those hours. No one wanted to establish this benchmark or goal somehow to justify the pilot. I guess that's the way to go, because, for example, in Juarez, we only had 30 trucks in average from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. So it wasn't justified. So by establishing benchmarks and having these volunteer companies showing and say, okay, I can deliver 50 trucks or 20 trucks, and then if you put all these together, it will be justified somehow.
Excellent. We have time for one more question and answer, I believe. Sir.
Yes. Jose and Jennifer, isn't it basically true that these pre-inspections require a great degree of security for the officials that are crossing back and forth to each other's side, and your agricultural inspection facility can work because you have a secure entry and exit for the officials? They're not walking down the middle of the street and then just knocking on the door and letting them go in. You have a corridor, special access, ingress and egress. So I think that people need to take that into consideration, because you're not going to put it a mile away from the port of entry. And the pre-clearance activities on your chips and stuff, what's the processes and the complexity that are going to develop from getting the truck in the condition that the chip can read to tell them what's there? That's what interested me, and it's a great idea. But how are we going to get that truck configured to meet those requirements, as well as the agricultural inspections on the other side?
The chips will be regular RFID technology available today that we will use. As you can see in the table, it has a 1-year implementation period for these locations at each location. So it's a phase-in project, and we start with some lanes and other lanes until all the lanes at that port are completed. And so that's how we plan to implement it. So I don't know if that answers.
The loading of the trucks and like you're talking on the containers.
Yes.
You don't know this container's up here. Well, that didn't happen because you got found out a year before. You find out when the ship goes.
Well, yes. You have manifest data, you have impedimental data or entry data in advance, and then you have the risk management portion. The same that we use today. No, the challenge is to tie or to connect shipment, conveyance, box, driver all together to make a determination, a risk management and targeting determination, and that's what the project is basically.
And to answer your question about the part, does it make it safer? I believe so.
But that's the only way you can accomplish these types of pilots is to have a safe ingress and egress.
Yes.
For your inspector, because they don't want to go to the Mexican side because of the obvious reasons. So that requires a special type of design and modification to facilities.
In Otay, we have a direct dedicated lane that connects the U.S. port with the Mexican port for this. But in the future, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have expanded our authorities. We can, as we expand in the future, we can do this in Querétaro or in San Luis or anywhere, or in Guadalajara. So even in Tampico. So the thing is that we, well, the thing is that we have made reforms, and Congress has approved these reforms. So we have the authorities, and we. Let me step back one square. The facilities have been designed to meet both SAT and CBP specifications in terms of security and processes, etc. So these facilities fulfill these specifications, and we both feel satisfied with this, and we're both more than willing to work on this.
Fantastic. Please join me in thanking our outstanding panelists. And don't go anywhere unless you absolutely have to. We'll be hearing from Commissioner Gil Kurlikowski here in 3.5 minutes. Thanks again.
Thank you, Erik.
Oh, great. Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, and I know Sam loves you guys. I know Sam has had several meetings with Kevin and